The Last Word with Lawrence O'Donnell starts right now. Hey, Lawrence.
Hey, Jen. Donald Trump, in his surrender tweet tonight, announcing that he was signing the bill, managed to attack Hakeem Jeffries, among others, in that. And Hakeem Jeffries will be here to answer that attack as our first guest tonight.
I'm really looking forward to hearing that. That was quite a screed. He used a lot of words in that, Lawrence.
Yeah, a lot of words.
Looking forward to hearing that.
Okay. Thanks, Jen.
Thanks, Lawrence.
Thank you. Tonight, Donald Trump put his surrender and humiliation in writing in capital letters in a tweet saying, "I have just signed the bill to release the Epstein files." While he was at it, Donald Trump once again treated his true believers as if he believes they are the stupidest people in the world. No one insults the intelligence of Trump voters more than Donald Trump. In his tweet announcing his total surrender on that legislation, Donald Trump said, "As everyone knows, I asked Speaker of the House Mike Johnson and Senate Majority Leader John Thune to pass this bill in the House and Senate respectively. Because of this request, the votes were almost unanimous in favor of passage. Everyone in Congress knows, and everyone in the country should know, that Donald Trump fought this bill every minute until he was told over the weekend that he was going to lose, both in the House and, much more importantly, in the Senate, where Donald Trump had every right to believe that the bill to release the Epstein files would hit a dead end in the Republican-controlled United States Senate, even if it passed the House of Representatives. Today, the man who really created the unanimous vote against Donald Trump finally emerged from the shadows and spoke. By the middle of last week, when it was clear the bill would pass the House of Representatives, Republicans in the United States Senate were strangely silent. Not a single Republican senator jumped to a microphone last week to say that he or she would block the Epstein files bill if Chuck Schumer tried to bring it up in the Senate. Each individual Republican senator had the power to block Chuck Schumer when he asked for unanimous consent to consider the bill and to immediately pass the bill, even before the bill had arrived in the Senate from the House of Representatives. But there wasn't a single Republican senator last week saying this is a Democratic hoax. There wasn't a single Republican senator last week using Donald Trump's words about the Epstein files. And by the end of the week, there was reasonable speculation that there could be maybe 100 Republican votes in the House, joining all 214 Democratic votes in the House to release the Epstein files. And that size vote would have been considered a massive bipartisan vote. And that would put tremendous pressure on Republicans in the United States Senate. And then on Sunday night at 9:15 p.m., Donald Trump tweeted, "House Republicans should vote to release the Epstein files." And as soon as I saw that, I knew that the Senate was lost. The Senate was lost to Donald Trump. If Donald Trump thought Republicans in the Senate would hold the line for him, he would have never told House Republicans to vote for the bill. That tweet by Donald Trump on Sunday night meant that the Republican Senate Majority Leader John Thune had communicated either directly or indirectly to Donald Trump that he was going to lose in the United States Senate. The parliamentary rules of the Senate give the Majority Leader almost unlimited power to block anything from moving through the United States Senate. We see that happen all the time. And the only thing that can overwhelm the Majority Leader's power in the Senate is an overwhelming number of senators in his own party. John Thune has been silent about the Epstein files bill this week until today. But his public silence just proved how much John Thune must have communicated privately to Donald Trump about just how badly he was going to lose in the United States Senate. And now we know that John Thune might have communicated to Donald Trump or the White House Chief of Staff that the vote in the Senate was going to be unanimous. That is what it would have taken for Donald Trump to suddenly reverse himself on Sunday night and say everyone should vote for this. So that when the unanimous votes hit, Donald Trump could pretend, as he's pretending tonight, that those unanimous votes were happening because he allowed it to happen. Since that Sunday night tweet by Donald Trump, this story has been all about John Thune, the man who was Donald Trump's last best hope for killing the Epstein Files legislation. It's not easy for a Senate Majority Leader to just disappear, but that is what John Thune did as the Epstein Files drama played out this week, first in the House of Representatives and then in the Senate. When the weakest speaker of the House in history, Mike Johnson, announced that he was suddenly switching his position right before the vote and had decided to vote for the bill, Mike Johnson said that he had a phone conversation with Senate Republican leader John Thune, and John Thune promised Mike Johnson personally that John Thune and the Republicans in the Senate would add amendments to that bill and fix that bill the way Mike Johnson wanted it to be fixed. The Senate would change the bill in a way that was acceptable to Mike Johnson. And the hundreds of House Republicans who opposed the Epstein Files bill until they suddenly flipped and supported it. Last night, we showed you the video of a childishly petulant Mike Johnson running through the halls of the House of Representatives saying that he was disappointed in the Republican Senate and John Thune, although he didn't dare say John Thune's name because the Republicans in the Senate did not amend the bill. That was his disappointment. They did not amend the bill. Mike Johnson said he was disappointed that Chuck Schumer was allowed to sneak the bill past John Thune somehow to get unanimous consent, presumably when John Thune just wasn't looking? That was a pathetic lie by a pathetic speaker, and I exposed that lie to you here on this program last night. Chuck Schumer announced 2.5 hours before he went to the Senate floor to ask for unanimous consent that he was going to go to the Senate floor and ask for unanimous consent. And Chuck Schumer said that. He made that announcement on the Senate floor in a speech that was televised in Mike Johnson's office, as it is in every office on Capitol Hill. One of the TVs in the Speaker's office is always tuned to the Senate floor. And so Mike Johnson knew what Chuck Schumer was going to do. And finally today, the dark night of Donald Trump's defeat in the Congress, in the House and the Senate, John Thune spoke. The question I wish John Thune had been asked by Capitol Hill reporters today was Mike Johnson lying about your telephone conversation when you promised him you would amend the Epstein Files bill? Instead, John Thune got a more soft-focused question about the most glaring contradiction that has ever occurred between a Speaker of the House and a Senate Majority Leader of the same party in the history of those two jobs. There is no instance in which the Speaker of the House claimed to have a secret conversation with the Senate Majority Leader of the same party about what would happen to legislation in the Senate, and then that publicly revealed conversation by the Speaker of the House is proven immediately, virtually immediately, to be completely untrue. This kind of conflict between those two positions has never existed before within the same party. John Thune is in his 20th year as a United States Senator. He trained for his job as Majority Leader for 15 years under Mitch McConnell's leadership. Mike Johnson is in his 7th year in the House of Representatives and is only Speaker of the House because the disgraced former Congressman Matt Gaetz managed to knock out the previous Republican Speaker Kevin McCarthy, who never once found himself in a public conflict with the Republican Senate leader. And as I showed you here last night, when Chuck Schumer went to the Senate floor yesterday at 5:20 p.m. to pass the Epstein Files bill by unanimous consent, John Thune wasn't even in the room. There is Chuck Schumer at the podium there, passing the Epstein Files bill unanimously after getting the word from John Thune that no Republican would oppose Chuck Schumer's unanimous consent request. And that desk across the aisle from Chuck Schumer, that empty desk is John Thune's desk. That is the majority leader's desk, the empty desk. John Thune wasn't even in the room. That is how unwilling John Thune was to do Donald Trump's dirty work in the end, after House Democrats spent the year exposing that dirty work. And then today, when John Thune was asked that soft, focused question, why weren't you and Mike Johnson on the same page? He did not refer to in any way Mike Johnson's claim about a phone call in which John Thune promised Mike Johnson there would be amendments to the bill.
He also said he was disappointed that the Senate didn't change the Epstein bill like he demanded. Why are you and him on such different pages when it comes to these huge issues?
Well, I mean, I think there are different, obviously, having served in the House of Representatives for 6 years, I understand there are different ways of doing things. The House and the Senate function differently. We have procedures and rules that we have to adhere to and follow. It's much harder to get things, to pass things, as you all know, through the floor in the Senate. And so I think sometimes there are differences of opinion or disagreements that are partly related to the difference between the House and the Senate. They're different cultures. But in the end, the Speaker and I talk regularly. We communicate on a consistent basis, and we are unified in terms of our objectives and goals. And that is to work with the President of the United States to implement his and our agenda in a way that benefits the American people.
They're different cultures. Mike Johnson doesn't understand the United States Senate. And with that answer, John Thune completed Mike Johnson's humiliation as the Speaker who spent the year trying to stop something he could not stop. New polling indicates that Mike Johnson will be knocked out of the speakership in next year's congressional elections. The latest poll on next year's congressional election shows Democrats surging now to a 14-point advantage in a Marist poll. That is the largest advantage the Democrats have had in that kind of poll since 2017, the year before the Democrats won back the House of Representatives, taking 40 seats away from Republicans. And today, Donald Trump offered this burst of dementia about polling.
I met with two pollsters because we were starting to think about the next election. They said, sir, if George Washington and Abraham Lincoln came back from the dead and they aligned and they went for the president, vice president as a combination, you'd be beating them by 25 points.
Leading off our discussion tonight is House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries. Thank you very much for joining us tonight, Leader Jeffries. And I lead in with Donald Trump there because that's the guy who House Republicans were being asked to follow, Senate Republicans were being asked to follow. A guy who obviously is willing to stand up there and tell that pathological lie about a poll that absolutely never happened and a conversation that never happened, a completely invented conversation, the kind of conversation that if your grandfather did it, you'd try to get him some care. That's the person who Mike Johnson was trying to get every Republican to support on this vote until he knew he couldn't.
That's exactly right. What we're witnessing is an extraordinary meltdown in real time. Donald Trump and Republicans have failed the American people from the very beginning of his presidency, and we're starting to see the reality of that hit my Republican colleagues. And we saw that with the unconditional surrender, resulting in the Epstein files being released. Now, it's wild to me that Donald Trump would suggest that, I guess he's saying he could beat George Washington and Abraham Lincoln. This guy couldn't beat Richard Nixon right now because he's been such a disaster as our president.
I want to ask you about Donald Trump's attack on you tonight. You know, in his announcement, I have just signed the bill to release the Epstein files. He surrounded it with this long screed against a lot of people, including you. And the quote from the statement that he wrote tonight is, Minority Leader Hakeem Jeffries, who asked Epstein to donate to his campaign after Epstein was charged. And we found the email that he's referring to. It's a a 2013 fundraising email that looks like that I'm sure you've seen. What is your response to that?
Yeah, he knows that that's a lie as it relates to anything that I've personally asked for. In fact, you had some House Republicans suggesting on the House floor that I had somehow met with Epstein, had dinner with Epstein, raised money from Epstein, none of which is true. This random email that he's referring to was first brought to my attention yesterday. And so what we're seeing from Donald Trump and the Republicans is that they've repeatedly tried to distract after failing with their effort to suppress the Epstein files. This was a victory for the survivors. It's a victory for the American people. It's a victory for transparency. And we're going to stay on the case until these files are released. And once that happens, there's going to be real accountability.
About the email, I just want to clarify for the audience, the email is not from you. It's from someone named Lisa Rossi, and it is addressed to Jeffrey Epstein. And it's the kind of email that goes out literally by the thousands to fundraisers like this, and clearly is introducing you to Jeffrey Epstein as someone they presume he has no idea who you are. It's filled with biographical information about who you are on the assumption that he doesn't have any idea who you are. And it's an invitation to contribute to these groups, the Democratic Congressional Campaign Committee, the Democratic Senate Campaign Committee. It's the kind of fundraising email that does go out by the thousands upon thousands. And I'm sure there'll be a lot more coverage of that. Leader Jeffries, as Donald Trump continues to tell this lie, that this was his idea, that this vote was his idea, he is assuming his followers are willing to believe absolutely everything. You know what this fight took. You know that this discharge petition made history. Just very few of them have ever passed the House. And as we go forward, as you realize, the question becomes now, what will the Trump Justice Department actually release?
Yeah, that's correct. And we expect that Pam Bondi, the so-called Attorney General, they're going to play games as it relates to trying to selectively withhold documents. And we're going to stay on the case. Listen, Representative Massey, Representative Khanna, this coalition, certainly the survivors, House Democrats partnering with Senate Democrats, we're going to make sure that the documents are released, that you have full and complete transparency, and then the chips will fall where they may. And that's what the American people deserve at this particular point in time. We're also going to continue to press our case on these issues that matter, driving down the high cost of living, fixing our broken healthcare system, certainly fighting hard to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits. And Lawrence, I think you know, House Democrats have launched a discharge petition to extend the Affordable Care Act tax credits for 3 years in order to try to make sure that tens of millions of Americans don't experience dramatically increased premiums, copays, and deductibles. And all we'll need is a handful of Republicans to join us, and we can force that bill onto the House floor for an up or down vote.
And it seems the discharge petition now is the route to legislation in the House of Representatives. It never was before, but Mike Johnson has completely lost control. Does this vote tell you that there are new possibilities in the House for your discharge petitions?
Yeah, that's absolutely correct. What we've seen is the ability to defy the Speaker of the House when we've made our case successfully to the American people. And it certainly is true that over the last several weeks, we've raised the stakes around the issue of the Affordable Care Act tax credits and the need to make sure we're protecting health care for working class Americans, middle class Americans, and everyday Americans so they can afford to go see a doctor when they need one. The pressure will continue to mount the closer that we get to the end of December. And this is a viable vehicle available to us to get things done for the American people.
What do you make? I normally don't talk about polls very much here, but that poll is quite striking. That you Democrats now have a 14-point advantage in the general ballot poll in congressional elections. That's what it was a year before. You won back the House of Representatives last time.
Yeah, no, and it's consistent with everything that we've seen, including the very real results a few weeks ago during the general election when Democrats were successful all across the country, in Virginia, in New Jersey, in New York, in California with Prop 50, in Pennsylvania, in Mississippi, in Georgia, and in many other places throughout the nation. We're going to continue to see the American people rejecting the failures and extremism of Donald Trump and the Republican Party and embracing the Democratic message that, listen, in this country, when you work hard and play by the rules, you should be able to afford a good life, afford to live the good life, good paying job, good housing, good health care, good education for your children, and a good retirement. That's what Democrats are fighting hard to achieve.
What does it mean for Donald Trump's presidency if that poll turns out to be true and the Democrats do take back the House of Representatives?
Well, at that point, we're able to cut his presidency in half legislatively, begin to really hold the administration accountable. The House will no longer function as nothing more than a reckless rubber stamp for Donald Trump's extreme agenda in most cases. Instead, will be a check and balance on an out-of-control executive branch, which is exactly what the framers intended the House to be.
House Democratic Leader Hakeem Jeffries, thank you very much for starting off our discussions tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, Senator Sheldon Whitehouse will join us next on what Donald Trump's Attorney General did not say today about releasing the Epstein files. That's next. Today, the Trump Attorney General, the Trump Deputy Attorney General, who is also Donald Trump's criminal defense lawyer, the Trump FBI director, along with other Trump Justice Department officials, held a press conference about an accused drug dealer who was indicted last year, before Donald Trump was president, and who is now on the FBI's 10 most wanted list. But the first question was about the man who says he was Donald Trump's closest friend for 10 years, Jeffrey Epstein. Donald Trump's Attorney General, Pam Bondi, refused to say that she would release the Epstein files now that she has started a new investigation of Democrats who knew Jeffrey Epstein, all of whom this same Attorney General said were not involved in Jeffrey Epstein's crimes when she officially closed the investigation on July 7th of this year, saying there was absolutely no evidence that anyone else was involved. When she was asked today what has changed, she said this.
Information that has come for information. There's information that new information, additional information, and again, we will continue to follow the law, to investigate any leads.
And here is the only new information that has emerged.
As far as the Epstein files I have nothing to do with Jeffrey Epstein. I threw him out of my club many years ago because I thought he was a sick pervert. But I guess I turned out to be right.
That is new information from Donald Trump revealed yesterday. Donald Trump has previously said he knew nothing about what Jeffrey Epstein was up to. And now Donald Trump seems to be saying that before Jeffrey Epstein was ever charged with a crime, Donald Trump knew that Jeffrey Epstein, who said he was Donald Trump's closest friend, was a sick pervert. So the first witness in the Trump Justice Department's new investigation should be Donald Trump. And the first question should be, Mr. President, how did you know? Mr. President, how did you know that your closest friend was a sick pervert? Joining our discussion now is former federal prosecutor Sheldon Whitehouse of Rhode Island. He is a member of the Senate Judiciary Committee. Senator, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It seems that we do have some new information, and it's from Donald Trump.
Yeah, it's pretty stunning. I think you phrased the question well. The earlier way to look at that was, what did the president know and when did he know it? But, clearly, if you're the CEO of a billion-dollar corporation and a teenaged entry-level employee gets hired away by a friend of yours, the ordinary response by anybody normal would be a cake, a card, and it was nice having you work for us. And the fact that Trump went bonkers and expelled this guy Epstein from his club, that was already a huge signal that he knew that something really bad was going on, because otherwise his behavior was inexplicable. So now to have him actually confirm it and to say in his own language that back then he knew that this guy Epstein was a sick pervert, it opens up just a whole new can of worms about what he knew and when he knew it.
And you have his attorney general today clearly refusing to answer in any way questions about, will you actually release the Epstein files? It was just blather that came out when that question came up.
Yeah, I mean, she's in a real mess. Remember, she came in saying that she was going to get to the bottom of the whole Epstein files thing. Then we discovered that billions of dollars had flowed through Epstein accounts, that suspicious activity reports had been sent to the Department of Justice, and not one had been investigated by her Department of Justice. We then went through the binders and all the shenanigans about the Epstein files investigation, the search for how many times Trump's name was in it. And finally, everybody's ready to clear the air. The House votes hugely, completely rolling Donald Trump so badly that he flips himself. And the Senate, by unanimous consent, put a new law out there in front of the Attorney General. And she can't say, I will enforce this new law. So I think we can look forward to more shenanigans out of the MAGA Bondi DOJ, but it's not going to go well, because this was a very clear statement by Congress and the American people, enough. And so when she goes back to more games to try to hide Trump's role in photographs and all of that, it's just going to get worse and worse and worse for her and for Trump.
So everyone out there knows that Donald Trump was granted immunity, criminal immunity, by the United States Supreme Court. Everyone knows Donald Trump has pardon power. And so more than ever before, there is a live suspicion out there that Donald Trump's people at the Justice Department can simply destroy any piece of the Epstein files that they might want to destroy, and whatever crime that might involve, they can absolutely leave their jobs with a pardon and never have to worry about it.
Yep, and that's exactly the kind of thing that Congress needs to be keeping an eye out for and investigating. It is very hard to interfere with as many records as the Department of Justice had. Remember, it took, what they say, 1,000 FBI agents trying to pour through them to figure out how many times Trump appeared in them. The thousands of times Trump did appear had to be identified. And so there's a pretty big record of people who know what was in there, and it's very hard to destroy evidence without leaving a trail behind. And with that many FBI agents and prosecutors and Department of Justice officials involved, they may very well try to do that. That would be very, MAGA. But I just don't think that they'll get away with it if they do that. They will have left a trail, and we will know that documents were interfered with and destroyed. So that ends up being a lot of pardoning. And every time one of these episodes happens, Trump's credibility with the public and with Republicans in Congress disappears. And at some point, that defeat turns into a rout.
Senator Whitehouse, please stay with us. We have to squeeze in a commercial break here. I want to consider next the indictment of James Comey, which now appears not to actually be an indictment after that shocking revelation in court today. We'll be right back with Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. There is no indictment Mr. Comey is facing. That is what former FBI Director James Comey's lawyer, Michael Dreeben, said in court today, adding the new indictment wasn't a new indictment. That came after the dramatic, stunning revelation in court today that the 2-count indictment returned against James Comey was never seen by the full grand jury. It was seen only by the foreperson of the jury, who signed it while a deputy foreperson was in the room, and no other grand jurors were present or saw that document. The grand jury was originally presented with 3 counts by Donald Trump's chosen prosecutor for the case, Lindsay Halligan, who had never spent a minute of her life as a prosecutor before stepping into that grand jury room. After the grand jury rejected at least one of the counts, Halligan then presented a new indictment for the foreperson to sign. This was revealed in a hearing today, which included the presiding judge asking if a memo written declining to prosecute James Comey, called a declination memo, existed, and the federal prosecutor appearing before the judge today said that Donald Trump's Deputy Attorney General Todd Blanche told him not to answer that question. Everything that happened in that courtroom today is something we have never seen before. Back with us is former federal prosecutor Senator Sheldon Whitehouse. Senator, in your experience, what can you compare this to?
I think this is a one-off. This is really quite extraordinary. This purported U.S. Attorney Halligan has 2 threads running against her in the federal courthouse in the Eastern District of Virginia. The first thread was the magistrate judge in that court just 2 days ago looking at her conduct in front of the grand jury and said that she blew it on the law, she blew it on the facts, and she blew it on the procedure. On the law, the magistrate judge said that she had given the grand jury, and I'm quoting here, a fundamental and highly prejudicial misstatement of the law. And then he went on to say that it looked like she had told the grand jury that they could rely on facts not in evidence before them, but facts that she'd asserted she might later be able to produce at trial. And then the third, of course, was whether the document that the grand jury actually approved and the document that she presented to the court were the same document or whether there had been a switch. So all 3 of those having gone wrong, the magistrate judge said to Comey's lawyers, you have got access to grand jury documents. It's grand jury secrecy. I'm going to pull that back. You've got discovery. So those preliminary findings and then the ability of Comey's lawyers to get into this mess and dig into it was already devastating. And then came the exchange with the federal judge about this last episode of the switcherooed indictment papers, and that just made it even worse, including Ms. Halligan having to stand up in court and admit that there were 2 separate documents. So it's going to be a field day for the lawyers on the defense side, and the prosecutors have to feel really on their heels in this case. And frankly, it looks like Ms. Halligan could be in very serious trouble.
So how serious? I mean, there's at least 4 lawyers that I can think of that associated with Donald Trump and represented him in certain kinds of ways who got disbarred for doing that. Is that one of the options here when you basically present a document that isn't the document?
Undoubtedly. And particularly once they've had a chance to actually go through the entire proceedings, determine exactly what took place, and perhaps even begin to dig into department files, get their hands on that declination memo, and put the whole case together for the judge. It appears that brick by brick, this story is already being put together, and the story that's being put together is of a false, malicious, and vindictive prosecution that broke multiple rules of procedure in order to achieve a wicked end for the political pleasure of Donald Trump. That is a devastating thing for a lawyer to have to answer for.
Senator Sheldon Whitehouse, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you.
And coming up, Boston has always been a city of immigrants. That's where my grandfather, who was born in Ireland, ended up. And now Donald Trump is threatening Boston's immigrants. Boston's Mayor Michelle Wu, whose parents were immigrants, will join us next. Boston has had many mayors who were the sons of immigrants, and now Boston has a mayor who is the daughter of immigrants. Republicans tried to crush her. They summoned her down to one of those House committee hearings where they first attacked university presidents and moved on to attacking Democratic mayors. And Mayor Michelle Wu, as we reported on this program after her congressional testimony, crushed Republicans on that committee, and her strong support in Boston surged. And then she made it look easy when she was running for re-election against the son of a billionaire family who dropped out of the race when he was 50 points behind in the polling, and the mayor went on to win 93% of the vote on election night in her re-election when she said this.
Right now, our city is being targeted because we refuse to stop doing what they say is impossible. Take care of our people. Take care of everyone. Wannabe dictators don't like seeing proof that democracy works. Proof that we don't have to choose between progress and prosperity, competence and compassion, cities and safety, common sense and community. So over the next 4 years, we will continue to fight and continue the work that we've started together.
2 weeks ago, federal immigration agents went to a car wash in the Allston section of Boston, which used to be owned by a dear friend of mine. And they arrested 9 workers who insist they were working legally at that car wash. They were sent there, the ICE agents, by the president of the Boston University College Republicans, Zach Siegel, who, like all of us, is a descendant of immigrants, and who proudly announced that he had been calling ICE for weeks to get them to arrest those hardworking people at that car wash, doing a job that he would never do. The Boston City Councilor who represents that district, Liz Breeden, was born in Ireland. She called the raid of the car wash a kidnapping, plain and simple, a horrifying chapter in the illegal and vindictive targeting of Boston by ICE and the Trump administration. Joining us now is Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, soon to begin her second term. Mayor Wu, thank you very much for joining us tonight. It is really an honor to have you here after your re-election. And you, in your campaign and in your mayoralty, you have run straight against this kind of operation that Donald Trump is running that ends up pulling people out of their jobs in car washes, and the city of Boston gave you 93% of their votes.
Well, it's great to see you. Always great to be in a conversation with a Bostonian. And look, I get to be mayor of the best city on the planet, but also one that for 400 years has stood up for what's right. And I spoke with the manager of this local business just earlier today, and he told me that another one of the workers has now returned home. And this particular worker, his coworker, taken on election day when the raid happened, detained for 2 weeks, and has legal authorization to work and be here in this country. And so we are seeing not just a policy choice about a different direction for immigration enforcement, but outright flaunting of the Constitution and laws. And again, as our country is at a crossroads moment, we're headed into the 250th anniversary birthday of the United States of America next July 4th. Boston is where it all began, and we are going to continue to stand up for what's right and take care of our neighbors and have their backs.
When we saw you, and we showed it here in the program, your testimony to that Republican House committee, where they were trying to turn you into something that you're not, and someone who they could exploit. You came back at them and crushed them. What lesson did you gain from that? What would you say to Democrats who have to be running and trying to take House seats away from some of those Republicans?
Look, one thing now, I am proud to report, instead of a 7-week-old baby that I had at that time, now I have a 10-month-old. And in all of these weeks that have passed by, unfortunately, we continue to see the same playbook used again and again. A false narrative trying to paint cities as dangerous, scary, horrible places simply because people are different from each other. When come to Boston, come to any of this country's thriving major urban hubs, and you'll see beautiful communities where people are bridging their differences, getting things done. And especially in our city, we have made tremendous progress over the last 4 years. More affordable housing created than in any comparable period. More expansion of free universal pre-K and early education, investments in our schools and advanced math and new programs and rigorous academics, and just a sense of safety from being not only the safest major city in the country, the lowest levels of crime ever recorded in Boston's own history, but a real sense of belonging and community. So you have to push back. You have to stand up for what's right. And most of all, you have to get things done that matter to people.
What can you do now in the face of Donald Trump's attack in so many ways on your city?
We are fighting every possible way that we can. We are in court alongside many other cities and with the leadership of our Attorney General and so many standing up across Massachusetts. We are also in close communication with every possible community organization having to mobilize, whether it is to try to fill in the gap if SNAP benefits lapsed, for example, or to try to make sure everyone has access to the safety and services that now the federal government is withdrawing from. We're seeing annual funding that Congress had appropriated for decades for public safety or tackling homelessness or public education now being pulled away illegally. And again, to the very core of who we are, attacks on the identities of our neighbors and fellow residents. So Boston will continue to be a city that stands strong on our values, and we will do whatever it takes to keep moving forward, even with what's been happening. In Boston, we created a first ever free program for every child growing up in our city to go to museums in Boston for free with their families. We have taken every opportunity to make sure that there are connections to new resources, protections for all of our residents, and we are going to keep going.
Boston Mayor Michelle Wu, thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thanks for having me.
We'll be right back. Boston's re-elected mayor, Michelle Wu, gets tonight's last word.